Okay, I want to show you how to insert a radio button on a web form. It's very straightforward, but there's a couple concepts that you need to understand when using radio buttons. So first, let's just see the tag for adding a radio button. It's going to be input type equals, and inside those quotes there, it's going to be radio. And this is another of those tags where you'll go ahead and close the tag all within that one tag. So I've got my space forward slash to close it at the end there. So I got input space type equals, inside the quotes we have radio. That's all straightforward, but there's two things we need to know to really make our radio buttons work properly. So notice I got a tiny little radio button there. So I need to label it. So let's say this is for marital status. So maybe this is the radio button for married. I can just label it this way. You really need to use the HTML label tag, which I talked about in a different video. So for now, I'm just going to label it like this. But you'd really want to create a proper label here. All right, so if they want to choose that one, they can click it. Let's add one more, and then I'll talk about those two concepts I was referring to. So I'm going to go to BR tag and then add another radio button down below. So the way radio buttons work, and we're probably used to this behavior, is you click one and it unclicks the other one. That's the way they're supposed to work. Okay, so if we choose married, if we choose single, it should unselect. But in this case, we have to program that behavior. So notice here, these aren't really behaving like radio buttons. So when we select one, it should unselect the other. So there's an additional, when we add the name property in here, that's what's going to enforce that behavior. Let me show you what I mean. So we got input type equals radio, and we need to give it a name like most of our form elements. So we need to assign a name to this thing. But the name should really describe what these buttons are for. So I'm going to name this marital status or MRTL status or something like that. All right, so I've got type equals radio, name equals marital status. Now what's going to enforce that proper behavior is, instead of giving this one a different name, I'm going to give this other radio button that's kind of part of this set the exact same name. Right? So both of these buttons that kind of belong to the same set have the exact same name. That's what makes those radio buttons perform properly, is giving them the same name. So now if we check one, it should unselect the other. And the reason we have to program that is if we had another group of radio buttons down here, we would give that group a different name. That way, when we check this one, it wouldn't unselect from the other group. Okay, so that's the first of the two concepts I talked about. Input type radios, very straightforward. When we name them, instead of giving them different names, we give them the exact same name to make them part of the set. But we also need to give them a value, right? So in here, I'm going to do one more attribute, a value equals. And this is where it should have probably some value that's based on what the user is clicking here. So maybe the value here will be MAR for married, and maybe the value in this one would be SIN for single, or spell the word out, whatever you want your value to be. So that's not going to change anything in the appearance, but that's important because unlike a text box, when the user types in it and then they send this form data, whatever they typed in the text box will be sent. Well, radio buttons, all the user is doing is clicking a little bubble there, so nothing is really sent, and what's going to get sent is this value. So that's very important so that if the user, say, selects this button, whatever the value associated with that button is will be sent to the server, and we can process and know that they selected a single, not married. So these values can say be more descriptive or not, but they need to kind of tell the back-end program which of these two radio buttons was clicked.